We're talking today about jaw locking or lockjaw, as some people call it. So if you've ever experienced your jaw locking, so either you haven't been able to close your mouth or more frequently, you haven't been able to open it, perhaps you've only got a few centimeters or less than that, then I'm going to explain why that usually happens and give you some tips so that you can actually help yourself out when this happens. So if this has ever happened to you or you kind of fear that this might happen, then just make sure to save the video and then you can always come back to it if you need it at a later date. Okay, so my name is Ellie Lindsay and I am a massage therapist who specialises in treating headaches and jaw pain, teeth clenching and grinding and everything that goes along with that. And I do that in my clinic and I do that online as well. So we're going to be talking, as I said, about jaw locking and why that happens and what you can do about it when it does. So first of all, let's think about why this happens. So often it doesn't just happen out of the blue. Often you have some quite extreme experiences in the past with pain or like real clunking sensations on one side of your jaw or maybe both. Sort of a bit of a click when you open and close your jaw is actually quite normal. It's regarded as medically normal nowadays and not really anything to worry about. But if your jaw kind of has like a real clunk to it that is perhaps painful, then that's something that really needs some investigation and some intervention on your part, really. So the first thing to say is that if your jaw's locked and this hasn't happened to you before or it's really unusual for you, then the first thing to do is to go and get it checked out medically. So depending on what country you're in, if you're in the UK, that usually means going to your dentist and just having it looked at and just checked over before you really proceed with any interventions. But if you've done that and perhaps they've told you, oh, there's a waiting list to see somebody else, you'll need to wait, or if you've done that and you're either waiting for some sort of referral or you've been told to just kind of manage it yourself and wait for it to ease, then that's when these tips that I'm going to give you here will really come into play. So what happens when we open and close our mouth is that this bone here, the mandible, comes forwards and out of a fossa. Well, a fossa is basically like a dip. So there's a dip in this bone here, and this bone here goes into that dip. So when our jaws are closed, this bone, the mandible, is just sitting in that dip basically. When we open it, it stretches out of that dip. And if you imagine, it's kind of like this shape and a ball shape. So it's like this, and then it slides in, and then it slides out like this. Well, every time that we do that, we're obviously going to get, if there's nothing else there, then we're going to get like a rubbing of the two bones together, which wouldn't be very fun for us and wouldn't feel very nice. So nature rather helpfully gives us this disc, and it's called the articular disc, and it sits below this joint that's coming out of the jaw. So it sits below this and this is between these two bones basically. And then every time we open and close our jaws, then this disc like moves nicely along with this bone here. So with our mandible here, it just moves nicely along with it and just gives us a nice cushion so that when we open and close our jaw, it's not bone rubbing against bone or anything like that. And the other thing that nature does is that it's actually made this disc so that we can't feel it. So it has no nerve activity in the disc. which is really helpful because it's therefore not painful. So that's great. But what can happen, and there are various sort of theories as to why this might happen. I'll talk you through the one that I find in most people in a second. But what can happen is that disc can get out of place. So it can not move with the bone. So it cannot move with this bit at all, or it can slip sort of either side. But what usually happens if it's out of place is that it slips forward. And then what happens is not only do you not have the cushioning anymore as these bones move against each other, but then you have this disc that gets in the way. So usually when the jaw is locked, the disc has got to a point where it's actually blocking the opening or closing of the jaw. And that's what really causes that inability for you to move the jaw in and out. And that's what people that I come across with this, that seems to be the most common reason. But the reason why I said for you, it's always good to get it checked out medically is, it's good to rule anything else out as well. But usually that is the reason that the disc is preventing. It's become so far out of place that it's preventing that open or that close of the jaw, and it's getting in the way, basically. What can also happen is the muscles around the jaw can just really feel really stressed by this and can really tense up, and also adds to that restriction of the opening and closing of the jaw as well. So there can be this kind of real prolonged tension in these muscles that just won't allow them to open and close the jaw. So what I'm going to give you here is a couple of self-care tips for you to use, so that you can use these. Just you can use these regularly if you suspect that you're worried that your jaw might lock. Then these are just good things to just integrate into your self-care, whether you're suffering with this at the moment or not. Okay, so let's get on with it. So what we're going to be doing is first working on the main muscle of the jaw, because as I just said, if that jaw is really locked and it's causing the muscles to kind of really tense as well and prevent the opening, then we want to just ease them open. So we're going to find the masseter muscle, which is the main muscle of the jaw. And you can do that just by putting your hands on your cheeks here, and by just squeezing your teeth together briefly so that you can feel the muscles pop out. And that's the masseter where we're going to be working on. And we can do both sides at once. So all you're going to do is just take your fingers to where you felt that muscle pop out and just sink in a little bit. So we don't want to just be on the skin. We want to make sure that we're going through onto the muscle itself. And then you can just do some like tiny circles, and then just move around and do some tiny circles. And we're just really like encouraging those muscle fibers to release themselves. And you can do this multiple times a day. Just make sure it's not too painful. If it's really painful, then just come back a bit and don't go as deep in, but just perform the same movement of these tiny circles like this. And the next thing that we're going to think about is that disc itself. Now that disc actually is attached, has two attachments each end. And one of those attachments is a muscle, and it's called the lateral pterygoid. So although it's quite difficult to access, there is a way you can access it inside your mouth. But obviously when your jaw is sharp, you're not really going to be able to be getting your fingers in your mouth and feeling around for muscles in there. So we're going to do this on the outside of the mouth. So if you find your cheekbones, what you're then going to do is come down underneath your cheekbones with your index finger. And then you're just going to compress inwards there and kind of up onto the bone, and just see how that feels. It might be really, really painful, so just go gently here. And that's all we're doing here is compression. We're not doing any circles or anything like that. And then I'm just going to go out a little bit. I'm going to do the same up onto the cheekbone, and then you can do one more out, in, and then up onto the cheekbone. So as you can see, I'm like sinking underneath it, and then my pressure is going up towards the bone itself. And you want to get about 3 spots each side and just hold them for sort of 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And then the next tip that I'm going to give you is to use heat on the jaw as much as you can. So lying down with a hot water bottle, obviously not too hot, but hot enough, on your jaw, there would be good. You can get those kind of like patches that you could use to put on there, because really what we're thinking about is relaxing the muscles as much as possible, whether that is the muscle that's attached to the disc, because that can actually affect the position of the disc if that muscle is tense, and we want that disc to be able to release, and this main muscle here, the masseter. So getting heat on those muscles is really great as well. And then the last thing that I'm going to leave you with is keep up with the mobility that you've got. So if you can only open your jaw, say a couple of centimeters, then still just run through the open and close of your jaw. Even if it's a little bit uncomfortable, that's okay. If it's really painful, then obviously don't do that. But a little bit of discomfort is okay. And just keep up with the mobility that you've got. So keep moving, keep opening the jaw, keep closing it, just gently, and just seeing where your limit is, where you can get to. And then what I would encourage you to do is just to sit up really nice and tall and sink your head backwards. So kind of like when you give yourself a double chin. So sink your head backwards like this, and then try and open and close. And just see if that affects the movement at all. If you can actually get a little bit more movement when you're sat up tall and you have your head backwards. So kind of sinking back, and you might feel a bit of a stretch at the back of your neck there. And then try that open and close again. And you may find that even if it's an extra couple of millimeters, you've just got a little bit more movement there. And if that's the case, then as often as you can, just take yourself back into that position and open and close. So what we covered there was some massage to the masseter muscle, some treatment to the lateral pterygoid, because that attaches to that really important disc, and applying heat to the jaw and the muscles of the jaw, and also just trying that mobility exercise of actually sinking backwards with your head and then trying to open and close. So keep a hold of this video in case you need it, and you can also use these self-care ideas in between times where you may not have problems with your jaw as a preventative. And let me know if you have any questions on that. Always happy to help.